Welcome, everybody, to Money Mastery for Mystical Women Entrepreneurs. I'm Michelle Atlas, and I'm thrilled to have my peer and my friend Angel B. Hartwell with us today. And I'm going to just dive right in by sharing a little bit about her with you, and then we'll dive right into a juicy conversation. So, Angel is an internationally known author, artist, and evolutionary alchemist, a Be the Change Movement to Watch award winner and one of America's premier experts. She's appeared multiple times in major media. Creator, executive producer, and host of 14-time award-winning and Apple #1 internationally ranked Wickedly Smart Women podcast that I enjoyed being on at one point, and 3-time award-winning top 50 internationally ranked Leading Visionaries podcast, international impact and Bookfest award-winning author of Be Heard by Millions and Live Your Destiny. She's hired to consult with high-achieving visionary leaders who are called to be the vanguard of the creative age. I so relate to that, Angel. It's such a beautiful, powerful way to language it. So I am dying to ask you, because both of us are mystical women entrepreneurs, and we've worked with lots of mystical women entrepreneurs. So, you know, we know that these are some of the most gifted people on the planet. And yet, my experience has been that mystical women tend to have certain types of money challenges, and that the typical sort of, maybe type A sort of compete and conquer type person doesn't always experience. So I'm just really curious what the biggest challenge that you see mystical women entrepreneurs what you see them facing, and when they're really soul-driven, purpose-driven women, um, there tend to be obstacles when it comes to stepping into that entrepreneurial identity. And I'm just curious what kind of challenges you have seen.
Well, this is a really good question, Michelle. And I have seen a lot of different aspects. It's all underlying. There's the core underlying challenge from my perspective, especially when we're talking women, whether or not you're mystical or not, because I think that this applies also to women who might not identify themselves as mystical. Is we're literally still at the final edges, hopefully dying breaths of the patriarchy, right? And so, if you think about it, for 5,000 years minimum, the feminine has been subordinated. The feminine, you know, women have been led to believe that we are second class citizens, that we don't have any value other than being brood mares, right? And so we are at a turning point. We came in specifically with our mystical gifts as well as our practical gifts to be contributing to turning that over. One of my lineages that I'm part of is the Inca tradition of the Q'ero people, and they call it the Pachacuti, when everything turns over. And so we are here at the forefront of that. We embodied specifically to be bringing a new way of thinking, a new way of acting, a new way of believing, and most importantly, a new way of valuing ourselves. Most women have been subconsciously or consciously given, quote unquote, given their value by the outside world. And so, what happens when you step into entrepreneurship, when you have always been given your value by either your corporation or your father or your husband, or, whenever it's been, assigned to you, you've gotten this assigned value. It's very difficult when you step into entrepreneurship to understand that the nature of entrepreneurship is actually owning the value that you bring, identifying the value that you bring, and then identifying the value that the marketplace um, can absorb, and structuring your life and your business in a way that allows you to have that exchange. A huge problem is that we also have been conditioned to hold together the social fabric through volunteerism, right? Up until, just our generation, I'm sure this was part of your generation. Our parents, for sure, our mothers held together the society by free labor, volunteering. And so we're overcoming a lot of this conditioning, and we are also planting the seeds for this turning over of the ages where we as women stand in our power, stand in our awareness of what our worth is, understand that our contributions do have value that can actually be translated to monetary value, and then simply claiming it.
Absolutely. I love every word that you just said, and I so relate. Yes, exactly. And that's what you've just described is something that, I haven't heard identified so clearly too much. And it's that because it's sort of because this patriarchal paradigm that we grew up in was our normal, right? So it's like transparent. You can't see it. You're just being it, living in it, and you don't even know. And so the pitfalls are also, like we don't even know what we're tripping over. Exactly. Yeah. And really the way I see it is that what you're describing is it's a call to a different level of sovereignty, of really reclaiming, restoring sovereignty, not as in not being interdependent, but sovereignty not as in being, a puppet in somebody else's show, really.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so, right, and it takes some doing. It's like that sounds really exciting initially when you hear about it, but then walking the walk for, again, a deep, mystical, creative, sensitive woman can bring up a lot of stuff that has just become her normal and now is in the way of really this full expression and just this freedom, that has to happen. Yeah, love it. So tell us about your personal background and, coming from that same paradigm, how did you become the wealthy life mentor? And again, what made you decide to, build your business around wealth for women?
Well, I'm going to give you the short version, hopefully, here. I actually spent the first 20 years of my career in the real estate business. And so I'm really grateful for that because I actually was grounded in real concrete, put the numbers in the boxes kind of um, mindset. I worked in construction at the end of that. I was partnering with two partners, and we built 51 single family houses, 56 apartments, and an office building together. But I was the 25% partner. So I had literally no control in that, interestingly enough. And at the end of that, I had my spiritual awakening. And so, because I didn't have the spiritual mystical aspect of myself online for that first 20 years. When that happened, I left it all behind. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go as far away from this as I possibly can. And so I gave myself a couple of years to just explore all of these latent parts of myself that I didn't know existed. My artist came out, my author came out, my healer, my hands turned on, my healer came out, my performer came out. I recorded an award-winning Crystal Singing Bowl CD. I have so much of like these latent, untapped gifts and talents just choo came out. And I gave myself the grace. I gave myself permission to let everything go and allow for that emergence. And then I ended up opening up an art gallery and healing arts center, which was a huge money pit, lasted for 2 years. It was the kind of place where people would come in and they would sit in my art gallery and they'd say, "Oh, I just love the energy here. And they'd sit for like 2.5 hours in the sofa in the front window, surrounded by all of the beautiful energy that I was creating. And, if I was lucky, they bought a $7 rock. And that wasn't going to actually pay the bills. And so I had to reconnect and reunite the mystical with the practical in my life. And I had to, for more than one reason. Number one, I was like rapidly running out of money. Number two, I was a single mom raising my kiddo from, through puberty at that time or into puberty at that time. And number three, I came to understand that if you're going to create impact with your calling, your responsibility to steward that well requires that you do put some of these practical aspects back in and have that marriage. And so how I became the wealthy life mentor, kind of compressing this storyline, is it became clear to me that I had to marry those two aspects of myself. And then it became clear to me, and this is something that I work with my clients on all the time, that I needed to do the math of what I needed to create financially in order to thrive. And I needed to look at that math and I needed to be honest about it. And I needed to discern how that was going to happen in a way that would allow me to feel the freedom of my, mystical side, but at the same time, make sure that there was shoes on the kid's feet every 3 weeks when he was going through his growth spurts and the mortgage was paid on the $450,000 house and all the rest of the things that, were part of the life that I had created for myself. And so part of what happened for me in becoming the wealthy life mentor is I actually identified 5 different ways that I was warding off wealth. I was actually pushing it away from me. And a lot of it was based on the conditioning that we talked about in the first question.
Oh, I just love that. So of course we want to know what those 5 ways are, and we want to know what you recommend people do instead.
Yeah. Well, um, great. So the first way that we ward off wealth is by worrying.
Mm,
Um, Worry is definitely inherited. I'm sure your mom was a worrier or your dad was a
my dad,
worrier.
my dad was
Somebody,
a
somebody in
worrying
your lineage
warrior.
was a
Yes,
worrier. Somebody worried.
yes.
And worry, when I see it with my seeing eyes, when I see worry, it's like this dark, dusty, musty, moist, nasty, smelly old army blanket that's wrapped around anything that you're worried about. So if you start worrying about money, literally that's the energy that you're putting around it. If you
Wow.
start worrying about your health, literally that's the energy that you're putting around it. If you start worrying about your country, literally that's the energy that you're putting around it. And so worry is number one. Waffling is number two. So waffling is like being unable to make any kind of a decision to move forward. And I like to use an example of, like, let's say you're at a live event where they're making an offer from the stage for your entrepreneurship to like help you to be a better entrepreneur, and it's a $10,000 offer. And you're so excited and you're thinking about your business, and then you run to the restroom because they're having a little break and you're thinking about this offer, and your girlfriend texts you and says, "Oh my God, that Mediterranean cruise that we've been looking at for years, it's finally down to $10,000." And now you have two offers in front of you: the cruise ship or the entrepreneurship, the cruise ship or the entrepreneurship. And you don't make any decision, and both ships sail. And so waffling is a real challenge for a lot of people because and these are all interconnected, because you worry that if you make the wrong
Right,
decision,
right.
you're going to
Right.
be in trouble. So the third way that we ward off wealth is withdrawing. And so again, let's use the example of a live event, or maybe even this event here, virtual event, where you are getting some data and you're getting lit up and you're like, "Oh my God, I need to do the XYZ thing with Michelle, or the ABC thing with Angel, or the, you know, LMNOP thing with whoever else is speaking on this event."
Right.
And you're listening and you're like, "Oh my God, I'm so inspired." And then you turn it off or you leave the event and you withdraw your energy, you pull back your energy and you disconnect from that inspired moment.
Right.
We need to take action in the inspired moment.
Right.
And when we withdraw, we're often going into analysis paralysis. So those are the first three. I don't know if you want to comment on those or if you want me to do the other
Oh,
two.
well, no, yeah, I so resonate with everything that you said. I see it, of course, all the time. It's that edge that so many of, our amazing clients are walking, or prospective clients. And that, I don't know about you, but I used to walk that edge myself all the time. I just got to a point where it's such a power leak. It's such a drain to be in that ambivalent place that clarity is so powerful. It's such a powerhouse energy. The other comment that I wanted to make about it is that one of the ways I've really come to help people make those kind of decisions in a way that does not threaten their actual well-being is to really make the distinction between a hardship and a stretch. And they are not the same thing. We tend to blend them and they are very distinct. I think so. A hardship, obviously, we never want. We don't want to set ourselves or anybody else up to not be able to pay the basic bills, eat quality food, to take good care of oneself. Um, but a stretch is essential actually for the growth to really be active, the growth energy to be activated. And the way I always see it is a stretch is like it's an expansion. It's a stretching open,
Mhm,
not just a stretching out or a stretching over, but it's a stretching open. And when we open more, we're in a position to receive more and more. The door is what we're stretching open is the door, and we open the door, something's going to come in,
mhm,
And so it's like a law of nature.
mhm,
So those two distinctions, I think, are really important, in
mhm.
terms of a decision when people are in that on that
Yeah.
edge.
Yeah. Well, all of these are things that I've done. I've waffled, I've
Yeah,
withdrawn, I've worried. So
right,
the other two are whining, which often happens over wine. And what happens when we're whining over wine is that a couple things. First of all, the wine is reducing your consciousness automatically. So you're not in a solution space for
right.
whatever you're whining about because your consciousness is lowered. Secondly, often whining over wine happens with other people around. And so what's happening there is those other people are now colluding with your story of woe. Now, I want to speak about yes, there is a place and time to bring up what's not working. You do that with your coach. You do that with your mentor. You do that with a trainer or somebody you've hired to help you with this. There are spaces where you can bring up what's not working, which is not the same as whining. Whining is just bitching and moaning. We call it bitching over beer if we're talking about men, or whining over wine if we're talking about women. And nothing is going to change from using your energy. It's another power drain, using your energy, speaking into the world what's not working, and having all these people collude with you from a reduced space of consciousness. So that's the fourth way that we ward off wealth. And then the last way is waiting on. And we already touched on this a little bit when we were talking about how women have been conditioned to be volunteers to hold together the fabric of society uncompensated. So waiting on is that, it's I've done this in groups myself where I was running around like Cinderella taking care of everybody else at the expense of my own business, right? At the
Right.
expense of my own business. Instead of, I spent a number of years in a very large mastermind, very heavily invested mastermind where we had a, Facebook group and people would put their questions out and I was answering them for free. You know what I mean? I was running around taking care of everybody, waiting on everybody in and the event, the mastermind host, she was making $60 million, right? And so this waiting on thing is a real challenge for women especially. And the other way waiting on shows up is when we are waiting on the handsome prince to come and rescue us, or the lottery ticket to win, or whatever, to being in that state of waiting on something to come rescue you in some way. Now, do we have to wait sometimes? Yes. If I put the brownies in the oven, I need to wait 30 minutes until the brownies are done, right? Wait, taking and being in a wait mode for something is different than this energy of waiting on, where
Yeah.
you're either being like Cinderella taking care of your ugly stepsisters, or you're waiting for the handsome prince.
Right, right, right. Yes. Yes. And I love what you said, everything that you just said. And I think that it's so habitual and so automatic that we big-hearted, in tune, totally, picking up on what other people really need kind of women, just this is like breathing for us to function like that. And you don't realize it until, the money's not coming in and you're tired and you're giving and giving and giving. And yeah, right. Yeah,
Right.
totally get it. Totally
And
get it.
so when we step into entrepreneurship, we need to understand that we are taking on an identity as an entrepreneur. And
Yeah,
as an entrepreneur or small business owner, the identity is I have a responsibility to ensure that this structure that I'm creating
yeah,
thrives.
yes,
And we can use the structure, we can actually lean in to the structure of our small business or our entrepreneurship as a way to extricate ourselves from these old patterns. So when I first started my business, I was volunteering for a bunch of stuff at the time. And then I realized, I was like, I get, I, at the time back then, I realized also right away that I needed to make sure that I was charging five figures to work with me. Right from the beginning. I got very clear on that. I did the math for myself, and I looked at what I needed to do, and I looked at my skills and my expertise, and I said, "Oh, I need to charge minimum." At that time, I needed a minimum of $10,000 a month. And I was looking at the whole way of going about it in the online space. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to have, you know, a, if I'm selling something for $97, I have to sell 100 of those every single month. Or I can sell one $10,000 package to somebody and I've got myself covered, right? So I knew immediately that I needed to have five-figure paydays. And when I made those first sales and I started serving my clients from all over the world, I've had clients in every English speaking country all over the world since 2008. Then, when I got tapped to, like, oh, could you do this volunteer thing? I immediately was like, oh, you're going to have to find somebody else because my business is busy,
right,
or I need to use that time for marketing, or I need to use that time for
right,
speaking, or I need to use that time for, I don't have that time available.
right.
It's just not available.
Right. This is a huge thing actually, because doing what you did requires a certain kind of courage. And because I think that what happens for, again, deeper, more sensitive, mystical women is we bump up against a lot of like, is it okay? Do I have permission? Do I deserve? And so when we go to just, this combination of thinking that, I've worked with people who I've had conversations with prospective clients where I said, so do you have your own business? Tell me about your business. And they said, oh, no, I don't have a business. And then they proceeded to tell me about a really beautiful business. They literally were so disidentified with being an entrepreneur that they literally didn't know they had a business, and they were
Mm-hmm.
making money providing a direct service that was benefiting lots of people. And so that might sound extreme, but I found it to not, I remember when I started, people would, I realized I had started a business. I did know that, but when people would ask me, I felt like I was like, stuttering over like, I have a business, like, it was like I just didn't feel, I felt like that was somebody else. Like, I do this transformational work, I help people, but a business,
Mm-hmm.
and so that has to, like you were saying earlier about all of this needing to be blended and married, integrated, married seamlessly. Otherwise, we don't have a business, is what happens.
And I have so we talked about wealth and the wealthy life mentor. So for me, the definition of wealth is I like to use a water analogy. So scarcity is like water in the desert. And what you were just talking about is like water in the desert. Oh, I have this transformational work that I do. And you're sprinkling water in the desert, and every now and then a flower comes up, but there's no structure around it, right? And so then it becomes desert again, and that's scarcity frequency. And the second frequency is the frequency of abundance. And one of the things I see a lot in the mystical women space is this idea, oh, abundance, abundance, abundance. Well, abundance is a wonderful frequency, don't get me wrong. You look out the window and there's a zillion leaves on the trees, right? Abundance is natural. The challenge with abundance is that abundance is like the ocean. And so when you're dropped, imagine being dropped in the middle of the ocean. Can you like see, feel, know, be in abundance? Absolutely. You're dropped in the middle of the ocean. It's abundant. However, what happens when we're in the abundance frequency is two different things can happen. Number one, we can be chasing after every little shiny wave, right? Chasing after every little shiny wave happens, and we invest a lot of money in all these shiny waves until we exhaust ourselves. We can sometimes have a big wave of abundance that comes and carries us up and throws us up on the shore and then retracts, and now we're back on the shores of scarcity. Or we can be so overwhelmed by the abundance that we're treading water. Like I went to Rite Aid and there was 47 different choices for Crest toothpaste. Never mind all of the other toothpastes. Like that's abundance, but it's almost impossible. That's where we get waffly because it's like, which crest should I use? Should I use crest? Should I use close up? Should I use, the abundance of choice is so overwhelming that we end up not making any choice at all. When we get to wealth, wealth is like the Colorado River and the Hoover Dam and Lake Mead, where there's flow. The river is always flowing. The dam is the boundaries that we set, and we use our business as a boundary, as a container for our energy and our power. And Lake Mead is the reservoir, right? And when we set up ourselves energetically in the wealth frequency, what ends up happening? Well, we have a reservoir, we have flow, and because of the boundary, power is being generated, and the fields are being irrigated,
Right.
and there's fruitfulness from setting some of these boundaries in place and utilizing them. And then you're getting to create the wealthy life by design that is uniquely perfectly suited for you.
Right.
And
Yes.
that's wealth to me.
Yes. 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 And what I hear you saying, again, it's something that I also live by and say all the time that we always have to stop something when we want to create something new. We get really excited about the new and we try to pile it on top of what we're already doing, and it doesn't work because what we're already doing either keeps us too busy or sabotages the new. So it's always like identifying what is it that you need to stop doing so that you can fully, throw yourself into this new paradigm yeah, exactly, exactly. It's a really important question. And so, before we dive into your gift and what you're offering, I have to ask well, two things actually. The first is, what would you say? I know that, lasting transformation for most of us occurs over time in many layers. We have many different breakthroughs that, deepen and deepen and root us into a different way of being and living, and creating. And I'm just wondering, what would you say for yourself is or was one of your key breakthroughs where you really started to see a shift in a very tangible way in the money flow coming into your world?
Yeah, as soon as I looked at the math and I said, I can't do a $97 off.
Okay.
back in 2000 and 2009. I want to tell a story about one of my clients as well, if I can,
Sure.
because I think this is a really good illustration. I think that we can tend to put off bringing in the money. We put it off, right? We literally are warding off wealth
Mhm.
by not having done the math and having the proper financial intent around what we're offering. So this woman that I worked with a few years ago, she had built this gorgeous brand. She had built a podcast. She had people liking and loving all that she was saying and doing on her podcast and her beautiful brand. She was spending $2,000 a month to an interview company that was getting her booked on all of these other stages. She was making zero money, zero money,
Wow.
zero money. She had invested $200,000. And when she and I got together, it became very clear that she needed to work with me. So I made her an offer. I made her a $50,000 offer. She invested another 50,000 to work with me. She didn't have an offer. She had spent 2 years of her life and $200,000 putting together all of this big flashy stuff and had no offer, which is why she was making no money. And we, within 75 days, built a five-figure offer for her. And she had her first sale, a $10,000 sale within 75 days. Within 100 days, she had a $12,000 sale. And by 6 months in, she had a $40,000 month. So, yes, transformation takes time and sometimes it can go very quickly. It
Yeah.
went very quickly because it became clear that she needed to stop doing some things. Like you also mentioned, I came in with my machete and I said,
Right.
you need to stop paying for these interviews. You need to stop doing your podcast. You need to start and focus and sit down and get clear on what you're offering. And we built a legacy body of work for her to offer that she can transform into certifications and have certified coaches and just all kinds of things. All this money was sitting there untapped, and literally within 75 days she had her first $10,000.
Mm.
So I don't disagree with you that we can have breakthroughs that are rolling over time and take that there are certain things we need to process that take over time, but we can also process things in an
Right.
instant,
Absolutely.
just like that. The change
Yeah.
can happen just like that.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I've had both. Yeah,
And
myself.
and and that's not to buy into the push, hustle,
No,
hustle. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm
no,
saying is change can happen in an instant.
that's right. I agree 100%. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Those breakthroughs that can happen in an instant, are they're so organic, I think, and so sort of deep and whole that they sort of do you,
That's
right?
right.
And then,
We
and they're
call
like
it we can call it a quantum jump if
they're
you
my
want.
favorite kind,
Yeah.
actually. They're my
Yeah.
very favorite kind. Yes, exactly. Right, right. But and I think that on some level, they've sort of been coming we in the dark, we don't know. And then all of us, right, there, because a lot of change and growth and evolution occurs in the darkness. I don't mean negative darkness, just where we can't always see it. And then all of a sudden, kabam, it's like, the floodgates open or something really amazing happens and it seems like magic, but there's been a readying and it's just matching you, just matching where you've come to. Yeah. Cool. Absolutely. So last question, and then please tell us what you're offering. Last question is, there's so much, right, that we can share with people, but what would your sort of, final great word of wisdom be to the kind of beautiful women listening to this that would
Well, we talked about the
be
five
most
ways that we ward off wealth, right?
absolutely, yeah.
So, I'm gonna offer one of the antidotes, like the main antidote for welcoming wealth is asking for and welcoming help and investing in help, right?
Yeah.
And so if anything that I have said resonates with you and you know that you need support and guidance and assistance to transform from one or more of these five ways that you're warding off wealth, or you know that you actually are deeply undervaluing yourself and you want the support to shift that, then reach out and let's have a conversation and we'll see if it's a fit for us to work together. For me, asking for help was huge. When I first got started in this business back in 2008, I thought I needed to do it all myself. So much so that I taught myself HTML to build my first website. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I
Crazy,
get it.
crazy, crazy. But the time I could have been spending that time that I was messing around building my own website, I could have been out making offers and generating money and making the impact that my calling was asking me to make. When we are called to be in service to this world, the way we do that in a business is by making offers and having those offers accepted and getting to work. So ask for help and welcome it. Welcome help.
Yeah,
Welcome help.
yeah, yeah. I
And
agree.
invest in it.
Right, right. It's an incredible activator of the energy of really of success and of change. Yeah, we've all had those experiences of someone, investing in our services, and before we even have the first session, getting an email saying, "Wow, as soon as I made my first payment, you can't imagine what started to happen. I can't wait to tell you." It's like, yeah, exactly. And we've all had those experiences ourselves too. Yeah, I remember once when I was early on, also going to a live event across country. It was a huge stretch for me financially, and I didn't think I could afford it. And on the way home, the stranger sitting next to me on the airplane hired me before we landed. Right. So those,
Yay.
yeah, right. And and I had just stretched and it came back, it all came back. So yeah.
My first speaking engagement live that I was invited to do, they had a table of this most incredible jewelry out that was like hugely expensive. And I didn't think I had the money for it. And I just went over to the table and there was this $5,000 piece on
Oh,
the
wow.
table. And I was like, that's mine. And I like pulled out the credit card, I pulled the home equity, whatever, put this $5,000 piece on my body, and then got up and spoke about 2 hours later and literally spoke about how I got the guidance to buy this and I don't know where the money's coming from, but I bought it. And then right at the, end of my speaking, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. This was back in 2009. I didn't know how to speak. I didn't know any of it. But three people came up to me and hired me, and I made all the money back for the piece of jewelry for sure. I think I made like $16,000 in the within weeks of
I
doing
so
it.
believe it. It's
Yeah.
so very exciting when those things happen,
Yeah.
and it's so deeply roots you in the faith and of the energetics of how all of this works. Yeah, it's so beautiful, wonderful. Anything else? Did you talk about your gift?
Yeah,
No.
no, we didn't talk about the gifts. So I have a quiz for your listeners here, for the audience here. It's at quiz.wealthylifementor.com, and it's the Wealthy Life Readiness Quiz. And it's just a really quick, simple, beautiful, fun assessment that you can take, and it will give you your level of wealth readiness. And then there's some kind of supporting information that comes after that to talk about what level you're at and some things that you can do to shift into the
Beautiful.
next level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Oh, it sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much. This has just been such a rich conversation. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, I think there's going to be a lot of learning. Yeah, very
Beautiful. Well, thank you
impactful.
so much for having me, Michelle. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, everybody. So we'll say bye for now, and we'll be crossing paths very soon. Much love.